there was a stark difference in PSG's numbers in the match yesterday compared to their season average in Champions League up to this point. So, I mean, Mike, when you look at this, what's the most shocking of these stat lines here?
I mean, geez, we go to the goals allowed, but it's really when those goals and the timing of those goals coming in. And they lost control of the game. And we said that about Barcelona, but even more deafening and even more visible in this match, it was one-way traffic. And then you start seeing some of the cracks in the pavement. Then you start getting the psychology of the club, not just the core group of players, but of this club. It starts creeping in, and some of the ghosts of the past.
You know what I noticed, though? When it did get spiky for PSG, I was looking at the bench to see who Luis Enrique would bring on to put some ice on the situation, to stop the bleeding. Desiree Doué on for Barcola. That was the only sub of the game.
Yeah.
You have Zaire Emery on the bench. Sure, very young. And then a whole plethora of young players. There's not really that guy with experience. And if Vitinha's having a horrendous game, arguably the worst game of the Champions League so far, who's that guy that you're going to say, all right, we need the quick switch, we need to adapt? This guy's the guy that's going to dial the temperature down. I didn't see that.
I think, putting the coaching cap on again, I think it's funny because in soccer, so different than other sports, right? We watch American football. You call it timeout in basketball.
Right.
And
yeah.
There is no ability other than at halftime to truly speak to 11 players, 11 different brains, 11 different ideas. And when you have the plan, you have the plan going into the game. And when that starts to falter, and we saw that obviously start to falter in this game somewhere in the middle of the second half where everything is going awry, 11 guys need to be on the same page, and everybody has a different idea. The outside backs have an idea. The center midfielder has an idea. The front three has an idea. And if they're not in sync, that's when it all goes to hell. And I think that we saw that happen in this game.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I felt really disappointed in, and I thought one of their worst players on the night was Marquinhos. A player who's been there. You think of the Champions League collapses. You think of the fact that he has your armband, and I just thought there was a lack of leadership in those tough moments of suffering from him. And when we go further down, talking about this game, I'm going to show you exactly why, because that has a domino effect.
You know what I realized? Not only Marquinhos, I thought Pacho was worse than Marquinhos. Sure, the leadership aspect, I totally buy into what you're saying, but when it started getting dicey, that partnership started to fall apart. It was who's gonna take out that fire, who's gonna put out that fire first without considering the other one, right? They were very jumpy. Ultimately, they got through, and it's a learning lesson.
They need to take Donnarumma out to dinner, though.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they saved them multiple times.
So that's 2 dinners they owe him. That's 2 dinners they owe him now. You think back to earlier in the competition, they owe him big time.
I think he's been owing the Champions League something. He's been owing PSG something. There's been specific moments that you can point out to a collapse of PSG here or there in the Champions League, and Donnarumma is probably the figure that represents that collapse. I think of that game against Real Madrid on the Bernabeu, where him on the ball, he gets pushed off the ball, and it leads to that first goal that then ushers in the Real Madrid comeback. He is building towards something. I think he needs to win the Champions League to ultimately be hailed as that figure, that legendary figure for PSG.
I want to go back.
He's on his way.
I want to go back to a quick moment. He also missed time because he got cleated in the face, and that gets lost in all the things that he's done, and all the pressure, and he actually lost his spot in coming back from injury. So this guy's had to deal with some in-house adversity, physically, mentally, and from PSG fans, because oftentimes they've looked at him as the weak link.
Yes, I agree with everything you're saying. I think you're making the storyline bigger than it is with him losing his spot. I don't think he was ever going to lose it.
It was a big deal.
Safanov was awful.
It was a big deal at the time before that Manchester City match.
Yeah.
Go back.
Yes.
And look at it. That was a big deal at the time.
There were a couple of questions, and I agree. And maybe to Luis Enrique as a tool to perk him up and be like, hey, we're going to play Safanov instead of you, for him to be better.
Could he, in Champions League, be viewed as the Emi Martinez that Argentina had in the World Cup? Can he be that big of a figure?
If PSG end up winning the Champions League, yes. Right? Like that lore, that figure in lore, right? It's almost like Dibu Martinez is more of a cult hero than he actually is a legendary goalkeeper in the history of our game, right? So for PSG, who's never won the Champions League before, coming off of 2 legendary performances like he did in that second leg against Liverpool was almost
exceptional.
It's on the way to be legacy defining because your legacy can't be
bringing the tears back now.
Time out. I want to we got to be careful when we say legacy.
Right.
This guy won a European championship.
And I prefaced this whole thing by saying, Italy aside, he's been superlative with Italy. This is all beyond the Italy conversation. I don't question him whatsoever when he puts on the Italy jersey. What has he done with PSG? And it's on the way to be legacy defining because to define a legacy, you need to win a Champions League. You need to win some sort of major silverware for a club that's never won it before. That's where I think that he can build towards this. We're at the semifinal. We're not there yet. This is the thing with football nowadays. We like to get caught up in these big moments and the recency bias. Because you're in the semifinal of the Champions League, amazing what they've done so far. You still got to build towards something. There's a big semifinal coming up against Arsenal or against Real Madrid. They're two really good teams. So keep on building those blocks and build your castle that it feels like a guy that's as good as Donnarumma deserves.
Yeah, and the reality is, semifinals of the Champions League, PSG, they've been here before, but you got to get the job done. Let's take a listen to what Luis Enrique, the manager of PSG, had to say post-match.
If we forget, we cannot forget because this is Champions League and you have to accept that the opposite team has a lot of quality. Aston Villa was playing with a lot of intensity in the second half, and they scored 2 goals in 3 minutes. In that moment, the match was almost dead. But I have to say, we started the game in a great way, scoring 2 goals, amazing 2 goals, trying to take advantage of the spaces. And I think in the whole 2 matches, we deserve to win.
John McGinn said they want to be back. If Villa Park and that team confirmed anything, it's that they deserve to be back. Do you think they will, though, Nico?
Now, you got to deserve it on the Premier League table, right?
Yeah.
The atmosphere, we would love to see it again, but there are several other teams in the Premier League top 5 race that probably think they deserve to be in the Champions League as well. And they've got a very difficult run in. It's going to take a lot from this Villa side, a lot of the performances that we saw yesterday in this very late run because their schedule is not easy. And Unai Emery spoke in the post-match saying that he wants to build, that he wants to see the next phase of this team. But we want to see that next phase come in Champions League football. And it's going to be a nail-biter.
We have our own Hannah Cash, who was pitch side across both legs, joining us now. Hannah, it's so great to see you.
It's been a whirlwind 24 hours. Last night was the most nervous I've ever been in my entire life. I had my head in my lap the whole game. I couldn't watch. Every time the ball went into Aston Villa's box, I was like, Anita, because I was sat next to Anita. I was like, Anita, I can't watch. She was kind of giving me like live commentary, like, oh no. And I was like, oh, it was so nerve-wracking. But yeah, a whirlwind of emotions the last 24 hours, but it's been incredible. Even the last week, going to Paris and now going to Villa Park last night, it's been incredible.
I mean, I can only imagine how incredible that was. You heard John McGinn speaking. I know you got to catch up with your brother, Matty Cash, of course, who plays for Aston Villa. So what is the feeling, from your brother and the rest of this team for what they were able to accomplish?
Yeah, I think it's a big sense of pride and being proud of what they've done. They've had such a good Champions League campaign. And obviously, last night wasn't meant to be. But to be able to go out losing 5-4 rather than it being 5-1 or 5-2, whatever it was at the start of the game. I think it's a big sense of pride in the dressing room, and they've done so well, and hopefully taking a bit of that motivation and momentum now into the Premier League so they can make it into the top 4, top 5, so they can be in the Champions League next year.
Where do the nerves rank from seeing that game and seeing your brother play in a World Cup?
Yeah, so I was talking about how the World Cup was probably one of the biggest moments of his life, and I think we've all kind of said this could top it or at least level it. I was really nervous at the World Cup. I think because there's a lot on the line at the World Cup, obviously, but especially in the group stages at the start, you kind of just get the excitement of the World Cup, whereas the Champions League, it's like you win or you're done. So maybe I think it was more nerve-wracking, especially last night.
When you've been at these games are not in your favor with Aston Villa. I mean, I feel for you because I wanted so bad for you to interview your brother after a win. I mean, I've got 3 brothers myself. I know how close that relationship is, but it just wasn't in the cards this time around.
They did win, Aly. They won last night. They didn't win
I know.
the tie, but they won last night at least.
But
That's a positive.
Yes, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I do know what you're saying. It is a shame, and even though they did win last night over the 2 legs, they weren't able to win. But yeah, it's just yesterday. I'll tell you a funny story. When that second goal went in for Aston Villa, me and Anita were in the press bit inside because it was freezing cold. So we were like, let's go get a hot drink because they're losing. You know, it can't get much worse than this. And then I went to the toilet, and all of a sudden the walls started shaking. All I could hear was people screaming, and I was like, "We've just scored! We've just scored!" and Anita came in running in like, "Villa have just scored! We're back in it! We're back in it!" And I was like, maybe I'm the good luck charm sitting on the toilet. Maybe I should stay in the bathroom the whole game, and they might win. But I didn't. I was like, no, I've got to go out and see the game. But yeah, it's a shame they aren't able to win. I'd love to interview him after a game, after a win. But it wasn't meant to be. Hopefully, maybe next year. If they're in the Champions League next year, that'd be good.
Which is a big possibility. And you did hear too, you know, from John McGinn, and I'm sure your brother shares the same sentiment, that that's the goal of this team. So, you know, what were some of the things that your brother told you after the fact in that conversation?
Yeah, like I said, it's a big sense of pride. But he says Aston Villa, they've learned so much as themselves as a team this whole campaign. And I said, well, what did you learn? What have you guys learned? And he said it's a lot of resilience. I mean, coming back from 3-1 down to the game being 5-4. So a lot of resilience and don't give up. And I think the fans really helped them through the game. I was speaking to a lot of fans before the game, and they all had belief. Even though they went into this fixture 3-1, not one of them said to me, I don't believe that they can win. So I think a lot of resilience they learned, having belief in yourself, because it was so close. And I don't think anyone really expected it after all that happened in the first 20 minutes or so. So a lot of resilience, a lot of pride to take into the next season, and now just trying to finish the season on a high, especially in the Premier League, to get back into the Champions League next year.
You talk about Champions League nights, you talk about Villa Park bouncing, but prior to kickoff, there was a bit of a low light. The anthem comes on, but it's the wrong anthem. I was sitting at home going like, what the, you know, and then that happens. So what was that like from your perspective, being right in the venue?
Don't even remind me. It was a nightmare, wasn't it? I couldn't believe it. And I was just like, I've waited my whole life to hear the Champions League anthem live, and this is what I get. I couldn't believe it. And it was like, maybe they're foreshadowing next season or what's going on. And me and Anita said, someone's not done their job properly tonight. And it kind of went viral on social media. I couldn't believe it.
How do you even get that wrong to begin with? It's not like you played in the Europa League qualifiers and then somehow made it into the Champions League magically. Like, it doesn't even work like that.
No,
like,
it doesn't.
How do you even label that someone must have, the only logical reason was someone sabotaged the poor person playing.
That's what I was thinking. I was starting to think maybe this is done purposely. I don't know who would want to do that. But it's one of the biggest nights at Villa Park, and all they probably need to do is click play on like an aux cable or something, and they can't even do that. They can't even do that. Yeah, I was so shocked.
Someone at Birmingham City got into the stadium and put labeled UCL anthem, play as loud as you can.
Hey, I just got to say, Hannah, I'm surprised you know what an aux cable is.
Yeah. You know what? That's about as far back as I go. There's the aux cable.
Okay. Hannah, great stuff. It's been so fun to watch you and all of your coverage, and enjoy the rest of your time with your family.